Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Podchaser, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Aditi Wardhan Singh, and she is here to talk about how our skin sparkles. Before we invite Didi back into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the podcast is brought to you by the last surviving dinosaur, the Tarantacranchosaurus, written by Stephen Joseph and playfully illustrated by Andy Case. The last surviving dinosaur, the Tarantacranchosaurus, tells the tale of how dinosaurs became extinct. And we're not talking about that life-ending meteor shower the paleontologists are always telling you about. The Tarantacranchosaurus is so very cranky that she makes all the other bigger and meaner dinosaurs disappear. That is, until she comes across the only dinosaur who is immune to her incessant complaining, the Tarantacranchosaurus. These two dinosaurs evolved into human beings, and that's where cranky people come from. Not too long ago, I told you that we're out at Chicago's Kids Expo, and I ran into a young woman who was probably 10 or 11 years old. She told me she didn't like to read at all. I asked her to take a look at the Tarantacranchosaurus, the last surviving dinosaur. She loved it. She had a really fun time reading it. And I think you and your family will love it too. The last surviving dinosaur reminds readers to be mindful of when and how often they complain, which is a lesson everybody can really benefit from, especially during these trying days of being locked down and quarantined. The last surviving dinosaur, the Tarantacranchosaurus, is available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other outlets. It's The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tarantacranchosaurus by Stephen Joseph. Joining us on the line right now from Richmond in Virginia. She is returning to the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we're really excited to have her back. The name of her new book is How Our Skin Sparkles. Please welcome back to the show, Aditi Wardhan Singh. Aditi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am wonderful. I am really excited to learn all about how our skin sparkles. Please tell us about it.
Well, it's a book that was born of a question my son asked me when he was in preschool, why do I look different than my friends? Because apparently, he and his friends got together in a circle and they put their hand out and they were like, hey, wait, you look different than us. Because, he was in an all-white school. And, he came home and he asked me and I answered him. And I used to, tell it as an anecdote to my friends, and apparently most kids do this because they are innocent and of course they don't really think much about it. For them it's just something beautiful to notice. Mm-hmm. And it was surprising to me that a lot of parents wouldn't answer the question. They would be like, haha, or just, brush it off. And I saw it as a great opportunity to teach kids about race and our cultures and how we all are beautiful inside. And that is where the book is born from.
You're right. There's, I imagine that would be a really, really difficult question for a lot of parents to answer. Why do you think that you were more comfortable than, say, a typical parent might be with that question?
I think I tend to look at questions as an opportunity to teach. Often what happens is sometimes you're just busy, you don't pay attention, or sometimes you're just awkward, you don't know how to answer. Mm-hmm. I had a friend, she said, my daughter asked me so many questions, and I said, oh, that's so wonderful that she's so curious. And she's like, yeah, but I never know how to answer those questions. And I was like, that's where I come in, you should always, message me, because I usually have touch wood, I think pretty good answers to kids' questions, because I always try to get the science and culture balance. Because I know that, there are many ways in which we can bring those two together And kids' questions are a great segue into teaching them about the world. And I think a lot of parents maybe do not, they tend to take their kids' questions for granted, because sometimes as parents you're just overwhelmed with what's happening around you and you're busy. And I think often you don't even think about, Googling a answer. I think it's more simple than that compared to other questions. Like even when my daughter comes and says, why am I smaller than the other kids? And that's what my next book is about. So I think it's more important to bring attention to the fact that we need to answer those questions as well.
Well, I do think you're right. My experience has been that those questions that you kind of blow off and you say to the kids, don't worry about that. Why are you asking those questions? It doesn't take away the curiosity.
Right.
Your kid may not ask the question again because your kid understands that you're very uncomfortable with it, but the question remains. And these are kind of questions that are important to talk about. What do you think? Do you think it is helpful when a kid asks you a question, when your kid asks you a question, and it's difficult for you to answer? Do you think it's fair and it's wise to say, "Gee, that's a hard question for me. Let's sit down and talk about it."
Perfect. I think I apply this to all business-related questions as well, where I say, hey, you know what, that's a great question, but I don't know the answer right now. Let me find out. And I think that's a beautiful way to respond to anyone at any time, especially children, because children need to know that it is okay to ask questions. Actually, coming back to what you had asked me earlier about how my thinking is different, is I have read a lot of mythology over the years. Like, I've been reading it since I was probably 6 or 7. And I think over the years, rereading all of the stories, I have a different take on what Hindu mythology and, mythology around the world has in relation to the world today. And I think that is where my perspective comes a little different, because even in my book, I have brought the two together, wherein our mythological story, a bit of it I've introduced, so that, people get awareness that, there is a story out there which relates to something that our kids asked us. So it is important for us to answer those questions and, be okay with them asking and make them feel comfortable with asking any question, because I prefer my child has me as their first person to answer those questions compared to the world.
That's interesting. Yeah, you do have a very extensive study of mythology, and one of the things, and I've certainly studied religions and mythology, not on your level, so that would even, but one of the things that fascinates me are all of the connections that we have. We have different religions, different races, come from different parts of the world. But when you look back through the myths, through the religions, through the teachers, we share a lot of the same stories.
Exactly. That's true. If you stop taking a bird's eye view, if you take a bird's eye view of all the stories that all the religions have, you will always see a thread of similarity through all of them. You just need to, get out of that bubble that, this is my religion story, and just, be willing to read everything. And that doesn't mean that you're accepting the religion or start practicing it. It just means that you're open to interpretation. And I think, if I may be so bold as to say, religion, as everything else, needs to evolve. And I think that's all it is a matter of evolving the stories a little bit, so that our children today can understand and accept the lessons better.
Well, I think there are a lot of people out there who may be offended by that idea of religion needs to evolve. And if you, I think another way to look at that may, that those folks may be more comfortable with is understanding that we have evolved and our understanding of the world has grown. And with that, just like, a baby who is 3 years old looks at something in a very different way than an adult looks at something and the understanding, we're, as a people, our knowledge, our understanding of science has definitely grown. And so our view of religion is evolving. Our understanding is becoming clearer and more mature, I think.
Yes, and that is why I said that what I mean by earlier is interpretation needs to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Like, thanks to all this corona discussion that's been happening, my friends and I were discussing that, in most cultures, previously we used to do namaste, joining our hands, or in Muslims you do adab, wherein, you're greeting each other but not, touching hands. And in Sikhs you say Sat Sri Akal with the namaste. So these are all ways of greeting each other wherein you're not touching each other, but you are acknowledging that, hey, you know what, I'm glad that we have met, which is different than a handshake wherein you're connecting with each other. So, for today's child, it is much more easier for them to accept that, this is a better way to do something, than, like I was telling my son, elbow high fives, right? Because we want to avoid shaking hands with our friends or hugging them. So I was teaching them, you could do elbow high five or do a namaste or something like that, just have fun. So he was like, yeah, mom, that was so interesting that, namaste is a way to, greet someone and not touch them. I was like, yes, that's what it happened. And even in Hindu culture, you touch feet. And that used to be a great way to get those exercise in, while touching feet. you bend over, you touch like 10 adults' feet early in the morning. You've got your one exercise down.
And of course, yeah, I was just going to mention, Aditi and I are recording this conversation at the beginning of the coronavirus quarantine that the nation is going into right now. In different parts of the United States are in different levels of quarantine. Here in Massachusetts, all of the schools are closing tomorrow, March 17th, and will be closed for at least 3 weeks, if not longer. So yes, we're being told to not shake hands and to wash our hands and to keep social distancing. And that the namaste greeting is a wonderful way to acknowledge somebody and acknowledge that you are seeing the human being in that person without hugging or shaking hands.
Yes, but there is a beauty in hugging someone, which of course a namaste doesn't do. But in Indian culture, hugging is the next step. When you're really close with someone. Right. Wherein in today's culture, hugging is something mostly everyone does. My kids go and hug every one of their friends. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that it's evolved. So that's what my friends and I were discussing, that in older times, this is why maybe people didn't get sick that often. Yeah. Maybe just one of the thoughts that arises. So just the conversation, and I think these are just ways of getting our kids to accept their own culture, because like I have mentioned in our earlier podcast, our kids are always riding different cultures, right? Mm-hmm. Like my kids, they are born in American culture, but they are of Indian heritage. So they have this, I have to constantly try to get them to understand why every aspect of their being is important.
I think that's so very important, helping kids embrace who they are and embrace the uniqueness and the beauty of who they are.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
One of the things that we kind of touched on earlier, I just want to go back. That whole idea of investigating or studying or being curious about other cultures and other religions and other traditions. There are a lot of people who will say, "No, I belong to this church. I belong to this religion, and no, I can't." No, I don't want to know about any other. I don't want to question my faith. I don't want, this is where I'm at right now. And I think people have that attitude because they're afraid. I remember speaking to a woman at my church, and she was telling me how she loves seeing my kids participate, and it's so wonderful. And she's so nervous about her daughter because she's going to be going off to college. And oh my goodness! And in college, that's where kids start to question their faith. And I said, well, that's a wonderful time. because that's how kids can embrace their faith more. We're teaching kids to look at the world through, and consider things through a scientific kind of process and to embrace science and technology. And I think we can apply that to our religion and our cultures and have a deeper, our faith can grow deeper through that.
Yes, it's a wonderful way to look at things wherein you understand the fact that just by studying something doesn't mean you're bringing it into your life. It just means that your interpretations will evolve. And I think for me personally, studying different things or learning about them has always made me understand what the beauty of the similarity in the things, and then I just cherish mine own more. My kids were in the preschool, which is Christian-based, and they learned a lot about Jesus, and it brought us a lot of conversation about the stories, and I would love to talk to them about it. We would say grace before meals and, things like that, and I think it's just beautiful. I mean, we don't need to be threatened by each other's cultures. We just need to understand that, there is beauty in all of them. And if we can just see the beauty and appreciate it, that's more than enough. You don't have to be accepting of it or, start practicing it, like I said.
Yeah.
You just need to be able to appreciate that, this is beautiful. What you're doing is wonderful. Like, I remember when I was doing my engineering in Mumbai, I used to go to this church because I used to find it very peaceful over there. And there's sayings that if you go and light a candle over there, whatever you wish for comes true. So I've done that a few times, and it I don't know if that didn't happen, but then it still made me feel very beautiful.
Yeah.
That, it's a very peaceful feeling sometimes to just go and sit in the nearest place of worship, because it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
So I have a friend who's converted religions. She writes for Raising World Children, and she's written in our upcoming book about how she has brought together all the religions, and she's teaching her daughter about all of them and giving her the option to choose whichever one she, most identifies with later in life. I think your friend is very right in the fact that in college you question your religion, because I did the same thing. But then the beauty of it is when you question things, your curiosity increases, and when your curiosity increases, you learn more. I learned a lot more about my religion by questioning it.
Yeah.
That, why is the story like this? Why does this story end this way? Or why do they say this? Why do we have to do this way? Why can't we do it another way? And then by learning about why something needs to be done a certain way, you understand it better. And then it makes it more solid into your own being,
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree. One of the wonderful I've read some stories that there is a tradition. Jesus, you mentioned that your child went to a Christian preschool and learned about Jesus.
Yes.
As Christians, we learn about Jesus, and we hear the story of his birth, and we hear a little bit of a story about when he was 12 and kind of got his parents angry at him. And then we don't really hear anything about him until he's 33. And I was fascinated to learn that there's a story that says that Jesus traveled to India and studied Hinduism, and that's why a lot of his teaching, a lot of his parables share this connection with India and with the Hindu traditions. And I thought that was fascinating. And I remember speaking to a fellow Catholic about that one time, and that person got so angry with me, just saying, no, Jesus didn't Jesus just worked as a carpenter, and stop looking at all that trash. I'm like, oh, dude, chill out, will you please? I really love that, that, hey, the person that, that the person that I am following was curious and went about the world and met people and studied. That's certainly, to me, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, it's all about cross-pollination. I personally would love to believe that Jesus and all our people that we aspire to and have been inspired by would be open to learning about every culture, because then they bring the best part of every culture into their world. I mean, I would love to imagine that is to be true. whether it is or not is a different discussion for a different time.
Yep.
But it is wonderful to, when you explore different things. It's just like, how your foods, right? You try out all different kind of cuisines, and then the best recipes that you enjoy in a restaurant, you try to replicate them at your own house. And I think that's exactly what we need to do with our children as well. Is if something is beautiful in a different culture, there's nothing wrong with, imbibing a portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like say, right now during these difficult times that we're going through, well, school is quarantined all the kids right now, which is great in my opinion. But it is a wonderful time to talk about, our cultures at home and learn about the world, because now their world is completely shrunk. We are all in our bubbles, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So it's more important than ever to, talk to them about stories, introduce them to diverse characters, talk to them about different concepts of the world, and, just bring everything beautiful into our world.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And this is definitely something that families can do with how our skin sparkles.
Yes,
yeah.
Certainly. It is, I have tried to build science and culture and concept to help any parent answer the question about, why do I look different, and how is that really important? Because what I have brought forth in the book is that is Martin Luther King's famous quote that says that the content of a character is the most important thing and not how they look.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I have a question. You were mentioning the namaste greeting earlier, and I was actually speaking to my wife as it's actually, the quarantine, my wife and I are going out for these walks 2 or 3 times a day, and it's really cool. But we're talking about that, and I was trying to remember exactly what namaste means. And so can you share the translation of namaste? When we greet each other and say namaste, what is it that we're saying?
So namaste basically means that the soul within me bows down to the soul within you. So it is nothing but accepting that I see you and I accept you as you are. And that is what it just basically means. Nam is, I think, means I bow down. Aste means to the existence kind of thing. Yeah. I might be wrong. Someone can correct me out there, but that's my understanding of it.
Well, that's a really, and that was very, I was really close. And yes. I love that, I think, because that is really beautiful. That when we shake hands with somebody, it's hi, how are you? A lot of times we do it out of habit. And we're not really saying anything more than, hey, what's up? As opposed to saying, my soul, my inner being recognizes that we have this connection.
Yes. I honestly feel that in today's world, this is, again, part of a bigger problem, is we just do not acknowledge each other. Like, I find it so beautiful, and this is not even about namaste or, it's just about greeting each other. When I go for my walks and someone looks at me and they look at my eyes and they smile, and it's just a beautiful start to the morning.
Yes.
And there are so many people who don't choose to do that. They just they're walking their walk and they're really into their zone, which I understand. But sometimes, when you're at the store or when you're at the market and just someone looks at you and they smile, or, when you're struggling with your child and you're worried that, you're being you're embarrassing people around you, or you're being embarrassed, and then another parent looks at you and they smile, and they smile that smile of understanding that, hey, you know what, I understand where you are, and don't worry about it. A smile can say so much more.
Yeah.
And I think just being there for each other that's what it's all about, is just accepting that, what, I understand and it's okay.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. That when you look in someone's eyes and your eyes meet, it's you're having an intimate moment that can be more intimate than, the bro hug that a lot of guys give each other, that shake the hand and one arm around the shoulders. When you actually take the time to look into somebody's eyes and to acknowledge who they are. My wife and I, we're run a ministry to a homeless shelter, and we serve desserts. And I've always told all the people, the members of our ministry, the beautiful thing about our ministry isn't that we're sharing cookies and cupcakes and cakes. It's that we're making eye contact and that we're acknowledging to these people that we see them and that we see that they're human beings.
Yes. And that's really important because like we all constantly say, hey, how are you? And the person say, oh, good. Mm-hmm. And that good means nothing.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're good. It doesn't mean that you're doing fine because no one's doing fine. Everyone's struggling at some level.
Sure.
And I call myself an oversharer because if you ask me how am I doing, I will give you an honest answer, whether you genuinely want to know it or not.
Oh, boy.
Because I think it's important to share because we all are like so secluded in today's world. No matter how many people you're surrounded by, everyone's just being artificial. And I think what I want to do by my book is is that bring people closer together and being open to asking those difficult questions to each other, even if it's just how are you, and being genuinely interested in the response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you can test that theory really easy. Anytime I am like you. I typically don't share bad things, but I very often when you're in line at a grocery store or wherever, and the folks say, "How are you today?" I will answer, "I am absolutely excellent. I'm having a great day. How are you?" And the people look at you like, "Whoa, wait a minute."
Yes. So for me, it's usually like, if I'm what usually happens with me at the grocery store or anywhere is I usually strike up a conversation because I love to talk, as you can imagine. And I have often made friends with strangers. And even if for those few moments, and then we end up talking about, if I see someone's wearing great shoes, or if I see that, the child is behaving well, I tend to compliment them. I love paying compliments because I had that done to me once when I was in college, and it made my day. And it's just something that I've grown up doing, and it's just something that evolved with me. Is striking up conversations is a great way to connecting with people, especially in my world where I work in the online sphere and I'm an author, so I'm pretty much writing books and doing stuff online, and that's meeting a lot of people and meeting no people at the same time.
Right. Well,
so it's more important to make those connections.
Absolutely, I agree. And a great way we can help our kids make connections is by sitting down and reading together, especially great books like How Our Skin Sparkles. Aditi, tell everybody, you have a wonderful website. Tell everybody where they can connect with you online, please.
Yes. So my website is raisingworldchildren.com. And we have a group of 20 contributing writers who write about their perspectives in balancing cultures and today's world in parenting. And they and I help to use our stories and strategies to empower parents everywhere to raise global thought leaders with a growth mindset that is global in nature.
Excellent. Well, we want to encourage everybody to check out this beautiful new book, How Our Skin Sparkles, by our guest, Aditi Wardhan Singh. Aditi, thanks so much for being part of our show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jed. This is always a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Roz McLean. She'll be here to tell us about the Body Book. That is the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your amazing book. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button at the bottom of the page. Let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Aditi Wardhan Singh. Please check out How Our Skin Sparkles. Also want to thank my incredible team. Of course, my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. My awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. My beautiful wife, thank you for all the support you give me. My amazing dog, Augie the Wonder Dog, here in the studio. And most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you so very, very much to taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking through the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.